Hola a todos. Today we are going to be reviewing the literary analysis section of paper 3. And as you know, this will be the first section, and we'll review an example from Unit 1 and Unit 2. All right, so let us commence with Unit 1. And this extract was taken from May, June 2016. Now, in keeping with the rules, I am going to do my literary analysis on a story that is different from the story that I use for my themes or my essay. Okay, so for Unit 1, you would remember that I did my essay on Como Agua para Chocolate. So I'm going to do my literary analysis on Felices Diaz, Tío Sergio. Okay, so we're going to read the extract and then answer the questions that follow. Empecemos. The passage is entitled El Secreto. Durante todos esos meses de construcción, animales y cambios, nuestra familia había estado tratando de alejarnos lo posible del tío Sergio, debido a un incidente que nunca entendimos muy bien. A principios de febrero, el tío Sergio había recibido un día una carta que provocó reunión y conspiración en la familia. Él la tomó y se fue a leer a su cuarto. Se quedó encerrado toda la tarde y no quiso bajar a comer. Por la mañana amaneció con los ojos rojos, luego había llorado. Un tío hombre había llorado. Andrés y yo nos quedamos sorprendidos, pero no preguntamos nada. Nos mandaron ir a jugar al patio. Y desde el sótano oímos como mami y Titi el L trataban de sacarle información, pero él no quiso hablar. Por la tarde, al pasar yo por comedor de atrás, el de diario, vi a tía L, Sara F y mami tratando de pegar un montón de pedacitos de papel. Era la carta del tío. Él la había hecho trizas y ellas la sacaron del cesto de papeles y la estaban pegando para enterarse de qué le había pasado al tío. Cuando me vieron, me eché a correr, pero mami me llamó. Lidia Angélica, venga acá ahora mismo y no me haga repetir la orden. Me hicieron jurar silencio y yo juré que nunca diría lo que había visto, pero me sentí traidora. Yo no era de la cofradía de ellas, sino de la del tío Sergio. Pero como juré por Dios, tuve que callar. Me dijeron que me fuera. Di vuelta por la galería y me metí en el cuartito de planchar, debajo de la tabla, al lado del comedor, donde ellas maquinaban la salvación de tío Sergio. And this was taken from pages 80 and 81. All right, so let's get to the questions. Relata el argumento del episodio. So this is basically saying that this question is basically, oh, well, it's not really a question, it's an instruction. So the instruction is basically to say what is going on, what's happening in this episode or this particular part of the story. Argumento, which is the plot. So basically describe what is happening, what are the events, right? So I said, en este episodio, la familia se alejaba de tío Sergio debido a su reacción a una carta que recibió. So in this episode, the family was distancing itself from Tio Sergio due to his reaction to a letter that he received. Un día recibió una carta que llevó a su cuarto para leer. So one day he received a letter that he took to his room to read. Se encerró en el cuarto y luego lloró. So he locked himself in the room and later he cried. No quería comer ni hablar de lo que lo había lastimado. He didn't want to eat nor speak about what had hurt him. Sin embargo, algunas de las mujeres trataron de averiguar lo que le había sucedido por leer los papeles que él había roto. So, however, some of the women tried to find out or discover what had happened to him by reading the papers that he had torn. So, during this episode, Tio Sergio basically destroyed the letter, and they were trying to put the pieces together to see what was on the letter to find out, well, what happened to him. Lidia las vio e hicieron que ella lo guardara como secreto. Lydia saw them and they made her keep it as a secret. So that's basically what happens in this episode. The one day, Tio Sergio receives a letter and he takes it to his room and later he cries. So the mother and some of the women in the family are trying to figure out what happened to him by trying to stick the papers together so that they can see what is on the letter to find out what's wrong with Tio Sergio. Lydia sees them doing this and they made her swear not to say anything about what she had seen, right? So yeah, that's basically what happens in this episode. 2, or B. Comenta el punto de vista narrativo. Justifica tu respuesta. So comment on the narrative point of view, justify your response. So in this case, we have to mention the point of view that mention the point of view from which the story is being told. This would obviously be the first person, and now we have to justify that. So el punto de vista narrativo es la primera persona. So the narrative point of view is the first person. La narradora es Lidia y se refirió a sí misma como parte del grupo cuando usó la primera persona del plural, nosotros. Okay, so the narrator is Lydia, and she referred to herself as part of the group when she used the first person plural we, which should be nosotros, which should be we. So she includes herself in that group. So that would let the reader know that this is first person. Por ejemplo, se puede ver en las siguientes expresiones. Nos quedamos sorprendidos, nos no preguntamos nada y nos mandaron a jugar. So those are just examples of that first person plural being used. Además, la narradora se refiere directamente a sí misma cuando describió lo que vio. Moreover, the narrator refers to herself directly to herself when she described what she saw. Mhm. Me eché a correr y al pasar yo por el comedor son ejemplos. So I talking about her reaction when began to run, she began to run and passing by the dining room, right? Right. Or dining area. Mm-hmm. Right. So those would be examples of the first person, which is when the narrator would directly be talking about herself. All right, continuing. Explica la actitud de los adultos hacia los chicos en el episodio. So explain the attitude of the adults towards the children in this episode or in the episode. So we see that the adults basically do not want them to get involved because immediately when the children saw them asking Tio Sergio questions, they sent them away to play. So obviously the adults did not want them to find out what was going on or maybe to see their uncle suffering. So I said, en este episodio, los adultos eran protectores de los niños porque no querían que los niños vieran a su tío llorando. In this episode, the adults were protective of the children because they didn't want that the children saw. They didn't want their children. They didn't want the children to see their uncle crying. Como resultado, los mandaron a jugar al patio. So they sent them to play in the patio. Mhm. Además, lo que le estaba pasando era un asunto de adultos y no tenía nada que ver con los niños. Moreover, what was happening to him was an issue, basically an adult issue, and it had nothing to do with the children. Entonces, los adultos pensaron que los niños no deberían meterse. So the adults thought that the children should not interfere, basically, or get involved. This was an issue among adults that had nothing to do with the children. That's why they sent them away. They didn't want them to see what was happening. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the final part of Unit 1. Explica en tus propias palabras la oración. Yo no era de la cofradía de ellas, sino de la del tío Sergio. Pero como juré por Dios, tuve que callar. So explain in your own words the statement or the sentence. I basically was not from their, I was not really a member of their like sisterhood, right? Mm-hmm. But I was part of Tio Sergio's. Basically, she had a loyalty to Tio Sergio, but because I swore by God, I had to remain quiet. So this is basically talking about the dilemma. They made her swear not to tell anyone, but her she wants to be loyal to Tio Sergio. So if she obeys them, she would basically be breaking the loyalty that she has with Tio Sergio. But because she swore by God, she felt like she was obligated to obey the instructions. So this basically talks about the dilemma that Lydia faces. Esta oración representa el dilema en que Lidia se encuentra porque ella ama a tío Sergio y quiere serle leal. So this sentence represents a dilemma in which Lydia finds herself because she loves tío Sergio and wants to be loyal to him. Aunque ella no quiere guardar el secreto porque prefiere serle leal, escoge guardarlo porque juró por Dios. Although she does not want to keep the secret because she prefers to be loyal to him, she chooses to keep it because she swore by God. También significa que tiene mucho respeto por Dios. Also, it means that she has a lot of respect for God because she's basically going against her personal feelings just because she made a promise to God. Mhm. So that statement basically talks about her internal conflict, right? So the dilemma that she finds herself in. Okay, so that would be Unit 1. Mhm. Now, let's move on to Unit 2. Now, I would have chosen to do the analysis on El Coronel no tienen quien le escriba. And as you know, I would have done the essay on Cuentos de Eva Luna. Okay, so let us go to Unit 2. And this was taken from May, June 2016, but this will obviously be the Unit 2 equivalent, okay? So here we go. The extract is entitled Un hombre insistente. Los compañeros de Agustín, oficiales de sastrería, como lo fue él, y fanáticos de la gallera, aprovecharon la ocasión para examinar el gallo. Estaba en forma. El coronel volvió al cuarto cuando quedó solo en la casa con su mujer. Ella había reaccionado. ¿Qué dicen? Preguntó. Entusiasmados, informó el coronel. Todos están ahorrando para apostarle al gallo. No sé qué le han visto a ese gallo tan feo, dijo la mujer. A mí me parece un fenómeno. Tiene la cabeza muy chiquita para las patas. Ellos dicen que es el mejor del departamento, replicó el coronel. Vale como 50 pesos. Tuvo la certeza de que ese argumento justificaba su determinación de conservar el gallo, herencia del hijo acribillado 9 meses antes en la gallera, por distribuir información clandestina. Es una ilusión que cuesta caro, dijo la mujer. Cuando se acabe el maíz, tendremos que alimentarlo con nuestros hígados. El coronel se tomó todo el tiempo para pensar mientras buscaba los pantalones de Jill en el ropero. Es por pocos meses, dijo. Ya se sabe con seguridad que hay peleas en enero. Después podemos venderlo a mejor precio. Los pantalones estaban sin planchar. La mujer los estiró sobre la hornilla con 2 planchas de hierro calentadas al carbón. ¿Cuál es el apuro de salir a la calle? Preguntó. El correo. Se me había olvidado que hoy es viernes, comentó ella de regreso de regreso al cuarto. El coronel estaba vestido pero sin los pantalones. Ella observó sus zapatos. Ya esos zapatos están de botar, dijo. Sigue poniéndote los botines de charol. El coronel se sintió desolado. Parecen zapatos de huérfano, protestó. Cada vez que me los pongo, me siento fugado de un asilo. Nosotros somos huérfanos de nuestro hijo, dijo la mujer. Okay, so that was taken from pages 12 and 13. Now let us get to the questions. Examina el valor del diálogo entre los dos personajes. So examine the value of dialogue between the two persons. Okay, so we see that the colonel and his wife have two different points of view of life, as well as towards the rooster. So the dialogue allows us to see their unique perspectives. Okay. And it also allows the reader to see the experiences that they have had. Okay. So el diálogo permite a los lectores ver el punto de vista de los dos personajes. So the dialogue allows the readers to see the point of view of the two persons. Or characters in this case, but you know what I mean, characters, persons, yeah, characters. El coronel es un hombre optimista, mientras que su mujer es realista. So the colonel is an optimistic man, while his wife is realistic. Or, yeah, realistic, right? I'm going to explain that further now. Se puede ver en la reacción hacia el gallo y el hecho de que siempre espera la llegada de su pensión los viernes. So it can be seen in the reaction towards the rooster and the fact that he always hopes for the arrival of his pension on Fridays, because every Friday he goes to the office to see if his pension has arrived. Okay. Además, el diálogo, no, go back. Por otro lado, su mujer entiende sus circunstancias y prefiere no esperar. On the other hand, his wife understands their circumstances and prefers not to hope. So this is why he says she's realistic. Además, el diálogo revela las experiencias que comparten los dos personajes. Moreover, the dialogue reveals the experiences that the two persons share. Por ejemplo, el diálogo revela que han perdido a su hijo y desde entonces han estado viviendo en condiciones desagradables. So, for example, the dialogue reveals that they have lost their son, and ever since then, they have been living in unfavorable conditions or unpleasant conditions. So that would be the value of dialogue. Helps us to see the different points of view of the characters and as well as shared experiences. And that brings us into the second part. Comenta el contraste entre la reacción del coronel al gallo y la de su mujer. Justificas tu respuesta. So comment on the contrast between the reaction of the colonel to the rooster and his wife's reaction, and you have to justify your response. So basically, you got to talk what is the reaction and why. Okay, so we know that the colonel believes there are two reasons why the colonel believes in the rooster, because one, he sees it as a source of hope because it will bring them money, right? In April, as he said, in January. And two, is actually a legacy of his dead son because the rooster actually belonged to his son, who was also a fan of the cockfights. So we call it cockfighting, cockfights, right? Yeah. And the wife, on the other hand, the wife doesn't like the rooster. She sees it as ugly and whatnot. And she actually doesn't really have much hope because they're actually wasting, not wasting, but they're actually exhausting a lot of their resources to be able to feed the rooster. So this is why she said, where was it? She said in the passage, es una ilusión que cuesta caro, right? Because she's acknowledging that they are basically going deeper into poverty, trying to maintain the rooster, right? So yes, right. Por otro lado, su mujer wait, what am I? Oh, I went reading ahead, sorry. Right, so let's go back. El coronel ve al gallo como una fuente de esperanza. So the colonel sees the rooster as a source of hope. Cree que el gallo ganará las peleas, lo que significa que el gallo traerá dinero al coronel y a su mujer. He believes that the rooster will win the fights, which means that the rooster will bring money to the colonel and his wife. Además, es una herencia de su hijo difunto que fue asesinado en la guerra por distribuir información clandestina. So, moreover, it is a legacy of his dead son who was killed in the cockpit for distributing clandestine information or secret information, or even illegal information. Clandestina is pretty ambiguous. Por otro lado, su mujer cree que el gallo es feo y apostarle es una pérdida de tiempo y dinero porque ellos pierden todo para alimentar al gallo. On the other hand, his wife thinks that the rooster is ugly and betting on it is a waste of time and money because they are losing everything to feed the rooster. De hecho, dice que su cabeza es demasiado pequeña para sus patas. In fact, she says that its head is too small for its feet. So that would be the contrast in the reaction towards the rooster. Okay, third one. Que revela del carácter del del coronel la resistencia a los zapatos. Justifica tu respuesta con dos ejemplos. So what does the resistance to the shoes, what does it reveal about his character? And then you have to justify your answer with two examples. So as we know, the colonel was getting dressed to go down to the post office to see if his pension arrived, and his wife realized that he wasn't really dressed well, and she looked at his shoes and told him basically that those shoes that he was wearing should be disposed of, or should be thrown away because they weren't in good conditions. And he refused to listen to her, saying that he always felt that he felt as though he was escaping from an old person's home or an asylum or not necessarily an asylum, but an old person's home or senior folks' home when he wore them, even though they were the shoes that she recommended that he wore were in better conditions. So that reveals that he is stubborn. He's a stubborn man. So revela que el coronel es terco porque no quiere escuchar el buen consejo de su mujer. Ella le recomienda, it reveals that the colonel is stubborn because he doesn't want to listen to the good advice of his wife. Or he doesn't want to listen to his wife's good advice. Ella le recomienda que se ponga los zapatos de charol, pero él protestó diciendo que se sentía como si se fugara de un asilo cuando los llevaba. She recommends that he puts on the patent leather boots. But he protested, saying that he felt as though he escaped from an asylum when he wore them. Well, not an asylum, an old person's home, right? También llevaba botas que estaban en malas condiciones. Also, he was wearing boots that were in bad conditions. Es la razón por la que su mujer le dijo que se deshiciera de los zapatos. It's the reason why his wife told him to get rid of the shoes that he was wearing, of course. So those would be two examples. One, the fact that she recommended that he put on shoes that were in better conditions than the one that he had. And the second example, the fact that he was wearing shoes that were not in good condition. So that reveals that he is stubborn. Okay, last one. Explica el significado de la última oración en el texto. Explain the meaning of the last sentence in the text. So what was the last sentence? The last sentence was, nosotros somos huérfanos de nuestro hijo. We are orphans of our son. Now, we know that an orphan is a child who has lost its parents or lost his or her parents, right? However you want to refer to the child, right? So if the parents are now the orphans, then that would mean that the parents are basically suffering without their son because parents take care of children. So now that the son is dead, they're now the ones who are suffering, who can no longer maintain themselves or support themselves because parents take care of children, right? So basically we can look at that literally and invert and reverse the meaning. So an orphan is a child who has lost its parents, so he lost his or her parents, so he or she has lost his or her support system. Okay, so now the parent loses the child and they consider themselves as orphans of their child, and that means the child was their support system. So la última oración significa que el coronel y su mujer están sufriendo sin su hijo. So the last sentence means that the colonel and his wife are suffering without their son. Los padres cuidan de los niños y cuando un niño pierde a sus padres, se considera un huérfano. Parents take care of children, and when a child loses his or her parents, or like I said, depending on how you view the child, se considera un huérfano. So he or she is considered an orphan. Por lo tanto, en este caso, los padres son los huérfanos porque ya no pueden mantenerse a causa de la muerte de su hijo. Therefore, in this case, the parents are the orphans because they can no longer support themselves because of the death of their son. Mm. So we can literally interpret that sentence. Mhm. Okay. Ah, hemos llegado al al fin de, de este análisis. Espero que les haya gustado el video. Muchas gracias por ver y hasta pronto.